Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's dive into the top headlines of the hour. The White House announces a US-led Board of Peace to oversee temporary governance in Gaza as deadly violence continues despite a fragile ceasefire. The board includes Marco Rubio, Steve Witkoff, Tony Blair and Jared Kushner, with President Trump serving as the chair. President Trump says he may impose tariffs on countries that oppose his plan to annex Greenland, the self-governing territory of Denmark. He does not name targets or legal authority as Denmark, Greenland and US lawmakers reject the proposal. The US Justice Department investigates Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey over alleged obstruction of ICE operations. The probe follows the fatal shooting of Renee Good by an ICE agent, which triggers protests in Minneapolis. Syria's President Ahmed al-Shara formally recognizes Kurdish language rights and restores citizenship to all Kurdish Syrians. The decree follows deadly Aleppo clashes that killed 23 and displaced 150,000 before Kurdish forces withdraw. Venezuela's interim president removes Alex Saab as industry minister amid US pressure following Nicolas Maduro's ouster. The government merges the industry and commerce ministries as Saab is assigned new responsibilities. A US judge gives the Trump administration 3 weeks to reverse the deportation of a 19-year-old college student to Honduras. The court says her removal violates a prior order and recommends issuing her a student visa. Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine is forcibly taken from his home by the military to an unknown location after a tense election. Authorities remain silent as the internet blackout continues and rights groups raise concerns. The Trump administration says Canada will regret allowing up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into its market. US officials add that Chinese-made EVs will not be allowed to enter the United States. Now, this hour we start in the Middle East, and protests in Iran have significantly subsided following a violent crackdown that resulted in thousands of deaths under an internet blackout. The unrest, which began in late December as a protest over economic hardship, escalated into a nationwide call for the end of clerical rule, leading to the deadliest domestic conflict since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Rights groups reported that over 2,000 people were killed in clashes last week. US President Donald Trump, who had previously threatened military action, expressed gratitude on Friday after Iran cancelled planned executions of over 800 protesters. Trump emphasized that the decision to call off the hangings had a major impact on his decision to avoid a military strike. Let's listen in to what the US president had to say on the issue.
Nobody convinced me. I convinced myself. You had yesterday scheduled over 800 hangings. They didn't hang anyone. They canceled the hangings. That had a big impact.
Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Israel have engaged in diplomatic talks with Washington to prevent further destabilization in the region. And in other news, the son of Iran's late Shah, Reza Pahlavi, has called for international intervention, urging the world to target Iran's Revolutionary Guard to weaken the regime's repressive abilities. Let's in fact listen in to a few comments from him.
And just like those other tyrannies, the Islamic Republic will fall, not if, but when. The world must hear this clearly. The battle in Iran today is not between reform and revolution. It is between occupation and liberation. Today, As my compatriots call on me for leadership, I reaffirm my lifelong pledge by stepping in to lead the movement that will take back our country from the anti-Iranian hostile force that occupies it and kills its children. I will return to Iran. I am uniquely positioned to ensure a stable transition. That's not my opinion. That's the verdict delivered loudly and clearly by the people in the face of. Today, I ask the world to do 6 things. First, protect the Iranian people by degrading the regime's repressive capacity, including targeting the Islamic Revolutionary Guard leadership and its command and control infrastructure.
Joining us now is David K. Johnston. He's an American author and a journalist. He joins us live from New York. David, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. There's a lot to unpack there. Of course, we're now getting news that these protests have subsided, but of course, an internet blackout does indeed remain, with an expected Donald Trump military intervention or strike. We were unsure about what we were getting, seeming to be more and more uncertain now, more and more unlikely now, apologies. How do you think the US president came to this decision? Now, we know he was under pressure from other countries to stop going through with these strikes. However, what do you think was the final nail in the coffin to say that he won't intervene at this point?
Well, Donald is very mercurial, and in addition, he knows nothing about the history of Iran. If you were to ask him about Mossadegh's election in the 1950s or the former Shah's Savak, he wouldn't have a clue. But he does know that a large portion of his base insists there be no more land wars involving the U.S. overseas. That's going to be a significant factor on him. And then he was apparently lobbied very heavily by a number of Middle East countries to not attack Iran, even in an airstrike. So those two factors together would make sense for him to pull back, at least for the moment. And Tom, I would not think for a moment that the demonstrations are over. About 75% of Iranians are not old enough to remember when the Shah was there with his repressive rule. It's kind of strange to hear his son talking about how he should be the rightful leader of a country because of oppression, given that the Shah was incredibly oppressive to the Iranian people. So this is a very complex and fluid situation, but the Iranian regime that came to power in 1979 through the revolution clearly has a stability problem, and over time that means that they're vulnerable to coming down.
And David, these 800 executions which have allegedly been cancelled by the Iranian regime after Donald Trump pressure. Of course, Donald Trump has many critics when it comes to his possible intervention and the way he conducts himself when it comes to foreign policy. However, the alleged cancellation of 800 executions, is that a good thing that Donald Trump's done?
Yes, unqualified that if Trump is in fact the reason that they did not carry out the hangings, which is of course a way to denigrate someone as you're killing them, did not come off. That's a very good thing that Trump has done. And the regime clearly is thinking carefully about what step it will take next. Let's also keep in mind that Khomeini is 86 years old. So the people around him are going to be thinking a lot, not about Khomeini being there forever, but about what comes next when he's gone.
And let's talk about Pahlavi now, as you've mentioned, the son of the late Shah. Of course, he has been a long-time advocate for himself returning to Iran. Unclear what kind of leader he would like to be, but as you've said, the Shah was overthrown due to a style of repressive rule. What do you make of Pahlavi's comments there? And if, in fact, some critics are even saying, inciting violence. He is encouraging people to take on the Iranian Revolutionary Guard.
Oh, I think it's very clear that Pahlavi is trying to foment a revolution. The problem is returning him to power, not removing the current regime. You know, Iran is a country of more than 90 million people. It is the most sophisticated culture in the Middle East. And yet it's been unable to come up with a modern system of government. The Ayatollahs who've been in charge now for more than 46 years, they want to take us back basically to the 9th century. And the inability of this society to come together is partly the legacy of what the Shah did, his attacks on intellectuals, on those who challenged him during the 1950s, 60s, and 1970s until he was overthrown. But I think the most important lesson here at the moment is that the Iranian government right now is very unstable. And by the way, one other factor that hasn't been discussed, Thomas, the United States has managed, instead of figuring out how to make friends with the Iranians or at least neutralize them, to undo 1,000 years of enmity between the Persians and the Russians and make, at least on a practical level, friends of Tehran and Moscow. That's quite a negative achievement for the American government under both Republican and Democratic presidents in the last several decades.
David K. Johnston, stay with us as we move on to our next update in a related development. And France's Foreign Minister Jean-Noel Barrot confirmed a French-Iranian woman was injured in Iran amid the ongoing unrest. He stated that the woman is receiving care and that France is closely monitoring her situation. Barrot also mentioned that the French government has been in contact with nearly 1,000 French nationals registered at the embassy in Tehran, successfully reaching a large number of them. In response to escalating tensions, the Indian government has issued an advisory urging its citizens to leave Iran during a deteriorating security situation, ongoing protests and an internet shutdown. Several Indian nationals returned to New Delhi after commercial and special flights were arranged. The Ministry of External Affairs is closely monitoring the situation, with embassy staff facilitating the safe departure of Indian citizens, including students, business people and pilgrims. Meanwhile, the European Union's Aviation Safety Agency has advised airlines to avoid Iranian airspace due to heightened risks. The agency cited the potential for misidentification, with Iranian air defense forces on high alert as US President Donald Trump considers military strikes. David, of course, we've had international reactions from around the world. Diplomatic updates. First, we've got around 7 major countries pulling their embassies out of Tehran, assumingly temporarily. And also, of course, we've had countries at the United Nations placing more sanctions on Iran. Now, for these protests, which of course started off as protests about economic plight, does these countries withdrawing their embassies, also placing more sanctions, isolate Iran further, make Iran's economy harder to navigate, and therefore merely impacting the vast population of Iran that were protesting and are unhappy with the regime in the first place?
Well, the problem is that Tehran really doesn't have any friends, perhaps other than the Russians, of any consequence. They have managed to alienate all sorts of countries. And when you see governments withdrawing non-essential personnel, not only from embassies, but the U.S. at its military base in Qatar, the principal U.S. military base in the Middle East, has withdrawn a number of people as well, it tells you that the intelligence says there's more trouble coming. And of course, it's not unusual that you have huge protests, then things calm down for a while and they come back, and there are more protests. And the Iranian regime's ability to quell these protests is at this point quite unclear. There are reports of as many as 12,000 people killed, and yet that hasn't suppressed the protests. And given the age tree in that country, that essentially at least 75% of Iranians have no memory of living under the Shah, what they see is living under the repressive religious regime, then it's highly likely that will continue, particularly when young people conclude that conditions are so bad that the unknown future is better than the known future. That's when you get revolutions, when young people, especially young men, decide I'm better off with an unknown future than continuing under the current future.
David, do stay with us once again as we move on, this time to a different story. And US President Donald Trump has threatened to impose tariffs on countries that do not support the United States' claim to Greenland. He emphasized the island's importance for US national security, particularly for missile defense and military operations. Trump, who has been vocal about the need for the US to control Greenland, said tariffs could be used as leverage. The US is also in talks with NATO regarding the island's strategic significance in countering Russian and Chinese activity in the Arctic. Meanwhile, Denmark's Major General Søren Andersen said that military exercises in Greenland focus on countering Russian threats, not US concerns. NATO has invited the US to participate in military drills in the region, with tensions continuing to rise over Greenland's future. Let's listen in to what President Trump had to say on the issue once again.
And I may do that for Greenland too. I may put a tariff on countries if they don't go along with Greenland, because we need Greenland for national security. So I may do that. I'll give you a little, I'll take you out of that. In fact, that'll end up being the story. But actually, this is a much bigger story because we're reducing healthcare by numbers that you haven't seen.
Of course, this ongoing saga continues to unravel. We have we now have NATO troops stationed on the world's largest island. We have US lawmakers, bipartisan, may I add, visiting Denmark to show support and opposition against Donald Trump's plan to annex this territory. David, how do you see this developing? Of course, we've had diplomatic meetings with J.D. Vance and the foreign ministers of Greenland and Denmark. How is this looking? Of course, we've had also diplomatic engagements, but seemingly no change, no compromise. The rhetoric remains the same.
There is no more possibility of Russia or China occupying Greenland than of them occupying Florida. Greenland is protected by NATO, the largest, most successful military alliance in the history of the world. And any action by Russia or China against Greenland, and there's no indication they're plotting such a thing, according to the Greenlanders and the Danish government. But if that were the case, NATO would have the duty to defend Greenland. This is about Donald Trump's lust for power on one part, his belief that he runs the whole world, and secondly, his effort to get people onto every possible issue except the Epstein files, less than 1% of which have been released, despite Congress passing a law with almost unanimous support to release all of the files, which would establish whether Donald Trump is or is not a serial child rapist. That's what he's trying to avoid here. This notion that the U.S. needs to take Greenland is absurd. We already have a treaty from the 1950s. We have a right to have military bases there. He could staff up those military bases, but with NATO's obligations to protect Greenland to no danger. There is a danger to NATO. If Trump tries to take NATO, Greenland, that would be the end of NATO, and boy, would that make Vladimir Putin a happy man.
Yeah, and of course he has threatened to place these tariffs on people that don't support him. We've seen many European countries come out against, with a nicely worded letter, may I add, to the United States. However, is there any countries or any individuals, any leaders that do indeed support these plans and the US's right to annex Greenland?
Yeah, Thomas, that's a very good question. I have not seen any news report of someone speaking up on behalf of Trump on this issue. And by the way, let me be clear, under the American Constitution, the president has no authority to impose tariffs. That is the exclusive right of Congress. In fact, it is the very reason that Americans live in the Second American Republic under the Constitution, because the first American Republic in the 1700s lacked the power to tax. And eventually the Supreme Court is going to shut down Trump's tariffs, which are simply a tyrannical move that has no legal basis. And everyone who's been paying the tariffs, unless they're foolish, has been simultaneously filing for a refund.
David K. Johnston, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for taking the time. We now move on, and President Donald Trump has unveiled the founding members of the Gaza so-called Board of Peace, which is a body expected to be overseeing Gaza's transition in the wake of the ongoing conflict. Among the 7 individuals named to the board are US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff, son-in-law Jared Kushner, and World Bank President Ajay Banga. Moreover, Trump himself will chair the board, which is set to grow to 15 members. He called it, quote, the greatest and most prestigious board ever assembled. And the board's responsibilities will include managing Gaza's transitional government and forming an international stabilization force to maintain order. US Major General Jasper Jeffers has been tapped to lead the International Stabilization Force, and the creation of this board comes shortly after the announcement of a 15-member Palestinian Technocratic Committee, which will oversee Gaza's day-to-day governance. This is all part of Trump's broader peace plan, which began with a ceasefire agreement back in October 2025. While the ceasefire has faced accusations of violations from both sides, the peace plan's second phase is now underway, aiming for a stable future in Gaza. Joining us now is Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs analyst. She joins us live from New Delhi. Shruti, thank you very much for joining us. Let's first of all go through the members of this peace Board of Peace. Shruti, we don't have the full board yet. However, some key individuals. Of course, we've got Donald Trump as the board chair. We've got Tony Blair, the former UK Prime Minister, who led the United Kingdom into Iraq in 2003. We've got the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. We have Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, and one of the main Middle East envoys, who of course pushed to the end of that Gaza deal. We've got Steve Witkoff, the former real estate tycoon and new Trump Middle East envoy, and we've got Ajay Banga, the World Bank president, who some critics will question mixing these private sector leaders with geopolitics might bring some problems. Shruti, what is your analysis on some of these members that we have been told about now?
Well, good morning to you and your viewers, Thomas. What I understand is that the Board of Peace sounds more like a Board of Pacification, which is going to sell a modern city as a marvel of the new world kind of scenario to Gazans, or at least to the world in the name of Gazans. And they're going to even though the Riviera concept has been debunked in many ways, in many words, the construct of the board seems to resemble a board which is going to do real estate development of Gaza. So this is exactly what the Board of Peace is doing. They're taking Gaza as a piece of land to develop, to modernize, to showcase. And this has nothing to do with the internal dynamics or geopolitics or concerns or radicalization of Gaza in totality. So basically, US and Israel have decided that Gaza is a prime piece of land, and Tony Blair, who is in most Arab nations considered a war criminal for what he did with Iraq. And Trump is a man of his own. And Kushner is simply a businessman who is related to both Netanyahu as well as Trump, are part of this entire deal. This is just a giant board of real estate agency, which is being called the Board of Peace under the hands of USA. For me, it does not show that this particular board would change anything out in Gaza, would try and work for the benefit of Gazans. They're just going to use that piece of land to showcase Gaza as a prime piece of real estate.
And as you've mentioned, some see this as advancing Western or US strategic influence rather than a grassroots peace. Of course, as you mentioned, the Riviera plan. Any idea about how these individuals will negotiate and plan to move Gaza forward in the current state, which of course it is in, where 80% of the territory has been destroyed?
Well, they're just going to clear out the rubble and start building things, sell it out, which is where the World Bank comes in. They're going to give a lot of loans to Gazans. They have, instead of the Palestinian Authority, they have constituted a new board, NCAG, I believe it is called, and they are going, that is an apolitical, technocratic board that is going to only focus on industrialization and modernization of that strip of land. So this is what they are planning to do. They're going to set up industries, the loan goes to Gazans. They're going to set up real estate, the loans goes to Gazans. They're going to be buried in loans. So the economy of that place is going to pay for its development while the pieces are auctioned off to whoever is going to get the most benefit out of it. Mind you, it's a resource-rich region. It's as such, it has, if I'm not wrong, although I've not done a very deep think on it, I do remember reading that it does have possibility of oil also in those shores. Pardon me. And beyond that, I also understand that it's a shore, so shipping is important. It's a good shipping route. It helps secure Israel in a way that never before. They are, of course, wanting to call it demilitarization, disconnection of Hamas. They have, of course, on paper as well as in the 20 peace point plan said that no Gazans will be moved out. But if there is a development model which is completely based on industry and real estate going to be developed, where are the poor Gazans going to be put up? Probably in some tall buildings, shackled together in a beehive format, while the prime piece of real estate is going to be showcased, sold to major conglomerates. Businesses are going to be set up there, and these Gazans are going to bear the brunt of the loans that IMF and World Bank is going to give to ensure that this development that looks good optically but does nothing for ground up change is going to be put in force.
Shruti Dasgupta, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure talking to you. We now move on and finish this hour with some news from the tech world. And OpenAI has announced that it will begin testing ads inside ChatGPT in the coming weeks. This move comes as the company looks for ways to boost its revenue, particularly from the free version of the chatbot and a low-cost version called ChatGPT Go, which costs $8 a month. The company is aiming to close the gap on its massive spending, expected to reach $115 billion between 2025 and 2029. OpenAI made it clear that ads will not affect ChatGPT's answers, and the company will not sell users' personal data or conversations. Ads will be tailored based on user queries and previous searches, but users can opt out of personalized ads. OpenAI's decision to introduce ads marks a new phase in its plan to monetize the chatbot, while also working on AI products for sectors like healthcare, finance, and law. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.